Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's expert session with USGBC. I know that people are still arriving, so we'll give just a moment for everyone to get settled in. As you are joining the session today, jump in the chat and let us know where you are calling in from, what your role is, and what your interest in LEED V5 is. We love to hear from you, hear where you guys are calling in from, and also see why LEED V5 is important to you. Of course, today we are going to be going over the changes in LEED V5, and we are super excited to be joined today by some folks from USGBC. I'm going to introduce them in just a minute. Real quick before we start, this session is hosted by Click LCA. You may be familiar with us, but just in case you're not, we are the world's #1 AI-powered LCA platform. We do cover every industry, including the construction industry, and we provide access to a database of over 500,000 LCA data sets. We provide compliance methods for over 140 different standards, including LEED and LEED V5, and we're used in over 170 countries. We work towards powering 1 million makers of a zero carbon future. So that is our goal, 1 million makers by 2035. That's you guys. So thank you so much for coming. And another big way to power makers of the zero carbon future is with certifications like LEED. So I want to introduce and thank today's speakers. We're going to be joined by Wes Sullins, who is Senior Director of Materials and Resources at USGBC, and Lindsay Watkins, who is Senior Associate of Decarbonization at USGBC. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to invite them here on the stage with me, and we will go ahead and hear about the new changes coming to LEED V5.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for having us here. It's great to share. We're happy to share about LEED version 5 and our favorite subject, whole building LCA. I'm Wes, and Lindsay and I will be walking through kind of some major highlights on LEED version 5, and then we'll dig into the embodied carbon and whole building LCA and try to answer your questions about it as well. So again, thanks for having us, and let's jump in. Um, So USGBC, we are a nonprofit organization. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., but we are international. We've got offices all throughout the world, and we run lots of programs, education. We do advocacy and lots of coordinating with various experts in the green building community to try to raise awareness about green building and environmental solutions in the construction sector. Our main way of doing it is through the LEED rating system, but we also run rating systems on zero waste, and we have this Green Schools program and many other things that we do to help build awareness around green building, and that's really our mission. Let's see, again, LEED is our sort of main project that we work on. We've got lots and lots of buildings. LEED's been around for 30 years or almost, and we've got over 200,000 total projects worldwide. And we certify about 2 million square feet per day to our rating system. And so we are a global leader in that, and we are proud mostly about our LEED professionals. So these are folks that have gotten accredited and have training and education around green building to be either a LEED LEED GA, we call it LEED associate, or a LEED accredited professional with specialty. And that really just means that we have experts around the world that help speak the language and bring green building to markets all around the world. So it's a great group, and thank you all for being part of it. So we have a few announcements just to get through before we jump into the details. First, that we are a membership and a volunteer-driven organization. The rating systems and the standards that we make could not happen without the volunteers on our committees. And so right now, actually, we have an opening for volunteers if you're an expert on materials or energy or any of the other topics in LEED, our committees are open right now until June 19th. So snap that QR code and go apply. We're looking for experts to help us out on all of these things. Another announcement is that in LEED in 2026, later this year, LEED for Cities is going to be made formal, but we have a second public comment period right now that's going through June 16th. And so if you have interest in the rating system for entire cities, so this is a rating system that LEED B&C and IDNC and some of the others are about buildings and specific building attributes for green buildings, but this cities program looks at the entire city or a community as well and rates them and ranks them. We've got lots of participation all around the world, but the public comment period for LEED version 5 for cities is open until June 16th. So scan that QR code, and we need commenters, especially if you've worked with local governments or city governments and are interested in the rating system. We'd love to hear from you. And also we have LEED version 5 came out last year, and we've been working hard to transition our exams, those accredited professionals and green associates. And so now's the time if you're interested to register for the LEED V5 exam. And there's a transition that's happening. You see some dates on the screen there, but we're really excited to get folks up and using that exam. The V5 beta exam, so we're testing it out on some participants first, and that will help everyone else who follows calibrate the rating system exams and whatnot. So if you want to be part of that ground floor and really showcase your expertise in LEED V5, then hit that QR code as well and check out the exams that are open right now. And lastly, before we jump into the details, just want to thank our members. We are, again, a member-driven organization. We couldn't do it without all of your support, and membership dues go to help things like this that we do here, education for the industry, as well as all the resources that we bring to you. And we have lots and lots of excellent members, companies. Check them out on our website. And if you're interested in becoming a member, please check out that QR code and find ways to support the organization. All right. And now with that, we'll jump into LEED version 5, and I'll just give a quick overview, and then I'll turn it over to Lindsay to get into some details on embodied carbon in particular and whole building LCA and more. So something we announced just last week or a couple weeks ago is that we have extended the registration close date until June 30th of next year. So if you'd been on a webinar or heard or read some things about LEED version 5 timelines in the past, we had expected to have a transition to LEED version 5 on June 30th of this year, but we heard loud and clear from the market that there's some more time needed to get up to speed and also to find the solutions for the rating system. And so we've extended that close date. That means projects that are registered under version 4 and 4.1 can continue to do so until 1 year, a little over a year from now. And that gives time for everyone to, again, get ready, and especially places like internationally to for us to do some more work around getting the rating system out there and the tools and resources that support it so everyone feels comfortable and ready for that rating system push. So check out that QR code as well to find the dates and the close dates for all the rating systems. All right, so some big highlights though. LEED version 5, we took a step back when we created this rating system and decided there were some main impacts that we wanted to focus on for the rating system. And the largest one is decarbonization. So the entire rating system has been focused around carbon as a solution for the built environment. And that's going to be about half of all the points in the rating system address carbon in some way. That includes all types of carbon, embodied, operational, transportation emissions, things like that. We've also made a pretty big change in that any platinum building now has some requirements, which we'll highlight later in the presentation. But in particular, low embodied carbon needs to be part of those platinum requirements. So it used to be platinum just meant you got an 80 or higher on the scoring system to get platinum. Now we're also adding some requirements for decarbonization to that top tier of the rating system. We're also focusing on data for impact reporting, so more quantification and summary of data that projects will receive when they certify, We wanted the rating system to be very data-driven. We've also shifted to a 5-year development cycle. So the next rating system update will be expected to come out in 2030, which will be 5 years from the launch of LEED version 5. And we'll also touch on this too, but there's been quite a lot of project priority credits for customization that we've created in this rating system. So we've got our structured credits and categories, which we'll share on screen in a minute, but the highlight there is that we've wanted to allow more flexibility for project teams to really prioritize what matters in their region or to their clients or topical strategies that the project is attempting. And so there's now a 10-point category called project priority, which has a lot of customization and some things like pilot credits and regional credits. So we'll share some more on that, but that's an exciting update for V5 as well. All right, the main focus areas or impact areas for LEED version 5 were the three you see on screen here. There's decarbonization, which I mentioned is about half the points in the rating system. And then the other quarter points are from ecological conservation and restoration, and the final quarter from quality of life. So the idea is that we have to decarbonize rapidly through LEED v5, but we can't forget the ecology that surrounds the building and also the supply chains and things that our buildings touch. And also the occupants in the building or around the buildings and down the supply chain as well are also important aspects. So LEED v5 really is a multi-attribute rating system at its core, but we do have the emphasis on embodied carbon and decarbonization being a strong component of that. Just a little bit digging into this. So decarbonization, what do we mean by that? We mean all types of carbon. So operational, embodied, transit, water, the embodied energy of water, things like that are all included and quantified in the rating system. I think the next is ecology. Yep, ecological conservation. So this is things like conserving natural habitats around buildings or restoring them, importantly. So there's quite a lot on the sites category and the location and transportation category as well that looks at the site where the building is located, and also how building materials and supply chains are acquired and procured to make sure that they're protecting biodiversity. Things like the sourcing of raw materials or how materials, where they come from, things like that are also part of the rating system. And finally, human health, quality of life is a strong component of LEED v5. We've enhanced the indoor environmental quality section to have more credits and strategies that look at indoor air quality and indoor environmental quality. But we also think about adaptable and resilient buildings as well. So we even have a new prerequisite on resilience that all projects must do some planning and thinking about how a changing climate will affect the place and the location of their building, for example. There's also a new prerequisite on looking at human impact assessment. So what are the equity and inclusivity aspects of the building and the neighborhood fabric where it's being built, for example? There's some considerations for all project teams to look at when thinking about that in the building. And yeah, it's all about enjoying and caring about the building and space more, because we know that a well-loved building is one that will last longer and be maintained the best. And that's what we're trying to strive for here. So just a snapshot of the LEED scorecard, but this time, if you've seen scorecards before, they sort of are broken out by credit categories. And the one we're talking about today, of course, is materials and resources the most, MR. But throughout the rating system, we've kind of done this color-coded version of the scorecard that shows where the points fall within these three major topical areas of decarbonization, quality of life, and ecology. And as you see, there's a rainbow in each one, meaning that, again, LEED v5 is all about multi-attributes. You can find strategies in decarbonization, of course, in the energy and atmosphere section. Those are kind of those orange ones on the left. But you'll also find them through integrated process and location and water and the MR category as well. And that's true for all these categories. We're trying to really showcase that LEED v5 is a multi-attribute standard for all buildings. And as I was mentioning, we have some requirements for platinum. So any building that wants to get the platinum certification, which is our top tier, must achieve 80 points out of 100, plus earn these specific credits. So you have to get 10 points under the EA Enhanced Energy Efficiency credit. There has to be 5 points under electrification. So there's a big push towards electrification of buildings in LEED v5. We don't require no gas on buildings, but to get platinum, you have to show that on-site emissions, except emergency and backup needs, are not allowed to come from on-site combustion. There needs to be 100% renewables under the EA Renewable Energy Credit, and there's lots of ways to do that in the credits, but it's an important aspect of decarbonization. And then finally, reduce embodied carbon. All projects must get a couple points at least and save 20% embodied carbon in their project to get platinum. So this was a big shift in the rating system that we've never done before. We've never had these kind of requirements at the top tier, but it was something we heard loud and clear from our stakeholders that the time is now to decarbonize, and we wanted to put that squarely into the rating system as part of platinum requirements. All right, and with this, I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay to go into some more detail on the materials and resources section of the rating system. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Wes. So, as you see on screen, this is our materials and resources section of the LEED V5 scorecard. And one thing I want to call out that was showcased in the overall scorecard that was sorted by impact area is that many of these, to Wes's point, are multi-attribute. We start to see impacts that hit all three impact areas for certain credits. And so really embodied carbon is pretty far reaching. Um, We'll talk about this a little bit later, but one exciting thing I'd like to highlight here is how many more points we get for the materials and resources section in V5, which us on the materials side are always very excited about. So to walk it back a little bit for the materials and resources credit category, really driving this multi-attribute framework that touches on low embodied carbon materials, but also extends to healthy materials and circularity, um, thinking about the different aspects of a building. So, where are our heavy hitting attributes that we can focus on, such as structure, enclosure, and hardscape? As well as really understanding how circularity can drive the market for understanding highest and best use of materials, reusing our buildings where needed and possible, um, as well as we'll talk about the building product selection and procurement credit, but understanding how you can optimize materials all the way across their attributes. And additionally, we have really worked hard to align with the industry and where we're moving. So you'll see that throughout the rating system, as well as other kind of industry efforts to speed market transformation. So, kind of summarizing the big changes to the materials and resources credits, again, we have more points in V5. You'll also notice that the low emitting materials credit has shifted into the MR credit category. My favorite part of our LEED V5 updates is that it is now required to quantify and assess your embodied carbon on a project. No reductions are required, and we'll get into that a little more once we dive into the credits. But it's really about building carbon literacy and getting everybody up to speed in the industry of where do I even look for embodied carbon data and how might I quantify it? The reduced embodied carbon credit, of course, is about optimizing reductions and really prioritizing that. Um, Another key highlight is that the building and materials reuse credit is now a standalone credits, which is really exciting as that's a huge target for LEED V5 to prioritize building and materials reuse. One of the larger structural changes here is that you'll notice the Building Product Selection and Procurement Credit, or BPSP, has come from these three other credits, material ingredients, EPDs, and sourcing of raw materials, to be this broader multi-attribute credit that takes many things into account so that we can understand how materials compare closer to apples. And so, with that, just kind of coming back to high level, we are really looking to drive carbon literacy. And so, prioritizing things like assessing our embodied carbon and building understanding of where to find this information, as well as cradle to grave embodied carbon. So, addressing design optimization, material selection, reuse, etc. And then again, more points, which is wonderful. So, looking back to our scorecard again, we've done an exercise here in which we want to highlight the credits that have a direct embodied carbon impact. And I think this again comes back to understanding how those impact areas map across the different materials and resources credits. So, you'll start to see where, of course, quantifying and assessing our embodied carbon and materials reuse have a direct embodied carbon impact. Even in the building product selection and procurement credit, we have prioritization of product specific EPDs and optimized EPDs. And so we're really seeing that quite directly. But almost all the credits have an indirect embodied carbon impact. And we start to see that highlighted in planning for zero waste operations and C&D waste diversion. All right, so getting into the juicy details of the credits, we have the quantify and assess embodied carbon prerequisite. And so ultimately, this prerequisite is all about quantifying structure, enclosure, and hardscape of a project. I'll highlight that hardscape is new. So understanding those site elements that are hardscape and building those into the project to be assessed. And then understanding those top three sources of embodied carbon, as well as understanding how project specific strategies were considered to reduce those impacts. Again, you don't need to reduce for this prerequisite, but it really sets project teams up to understand what actions they can take and therefore get credit in the reduced embodied carbon credit. So, bringing us back to the intent, embodied carbon is new in terms of how long we've been talking about maybe something like operational energy. And so, really driving that carbon literacy. And we'll start to look at the calculator in a few minutes, but really understanding where the product information is coming from and how maybe through a pathway like a whole building LCA or EPD analysis, project teams can start to build on the knowledge of this credit. So what data do you need to do the prerequisite? You need your materials, the quantities, and then the associated GWP impacts, which we'll talk about some data sources for those in a bit. Highlighting what are kind of your heavy hitters for embodied carbon in the rating system. Whole building LCA is the best way to get points. Um, you can start to document um, all of those reductions and really rack up those points pretty quickly. So that's worth the most points. Um, Additionally, we have some pilot credits, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But we reward structural materials and transparency and documentation associated with those, as well as innovative materials, things coming up like tribally sourced wood and low body carbon steel, as well as novel concrete binders. So the big reduce embodied carbon credit, again, project teams will be tracking their structure, enclosure, and hardscape materials. And so option one is going to be that whole building life cycle assessment credit. So A to C and D if it's available. And project teams will have a baseline and a proposed model in which they will document reductions from. If project teams aren't quite sure and don't want to maybe pursue the whole enchilada of the baseline and proposed models, they could do EPD analysis, which is option two. And we have two pathways within this option, one being a project average approach in which project teams are taking a reduction, gathering reductions based on all of the materials for the project totaled, or they can pursue path two, which is materials type approach, in which the reductions are coming from material categories, which is broken out in a bit of a different approach. And we do have some recommended tools in the reference guide to help project teams along with this. Um, you can get up to 4 points here, um, but ultimately where you're going to be getting more points is in whole building LCA, as we talked about. One thing I will add is that a project team, say you aren't able to get too many reductions for your project, you can still get a lot of points by combining options. So I just want to flag the and ors between options here. Although with option 2, project teams could not combine path 1 and path 2. And then another really exciting addition to LEED v5 is this option 3, which is tracking construction emissions from construction activities on site. And so this is something where there's no reductions required, but for 1 point, project teams can get 1 point if their contractor tracks their construction emissions, and 2 points if both their contractor and subcontractor track those emissions. And again, I'll show this in the calculator in a few minutes, but really there are templates available, trying to align with the industry, but really just getting those points for documenting those construction activities. And so here's a breakdown of just the option 1 and option 2 points. This can be found in the credit library as well, and in the reference guide. But really, you're going to see the most opportunity in the whole building LCA, but you can combine strategies. And so that's one thing I really want to highlight here is that whole building LCA is really the highest rewarded strategy, but you can still get the maximum amount of points for this credit if you can't hit the maximum reduction. So if you, I'll actually go back here just to show this off. If you get a 20% reduction in GWP and you've done a whole building LCA, but you also would like to pursue EPD analysis for project average, you can get 6 points. So it's pretty exciting to be able to combine those strategies and target different points in the project timeline to make these decisions. Okay, and with that, I am going to stop sharing and reshare with the calculator. Okay. Team, can we see that? Okay, great.
Yep.
So we have a couple of updates to the embodied carbon calculator. And so this is going to be your kind of really big spreadsheet calculator that you're going to use for the embodied carbon credits. And so we've collaborated a bit with Carbon Leadership Forum, and I will say this calculator is under construction, so you may see a couple wacky things here. But I want to flag that the prerequisite is in here as well as the other options and that template tracking for construction emissions. And so one large update that we've made is the addition of CLF material baselines into the calculator. I think, we have the understanding that the most up-to-date CLF material baselines are incredibly valuable to project teams, and we think that it's a wonderful data source. And so, again, this looks a little different from the current calculator on the website. We've added additional material categories for project teams. I'm not sure if the dropdown is visible on the screen, but we do have those material categories that are similarly aligned to CLF. And then additionally, project teams will move from material category to specific, and then the material description. And all of which will be drop downs with the future opportunity to write in things that are maybe in that other category. From there, project teams will identify the material as structure, enclosure, or hardscape, and then they'll enter the quantity in the units. One thing that we've adjusted here is an in the background normalization of the data units. And so this will help project teams if there are some kind of interesting things going on with unit conversion, or there is an EPD that has slightly different units, that will all be normalized to make sure there's no issues as project teams enter data. Another new addition is the pre-populated GWP intensity from the CLF baselines. And so this will populate here when project teams select the material and then also select the data source as Carbon Leadership Forum. If project teams are using something like a product-specific EPD or an industry-wide or another data source that is regionally appropriate, they will enter a custom GWP intensity, which will override the CLF baselines. The calculator will total out all of these things, and then I'm going to jump over to the option 2 tab. For EPD analysis, this data will be fed through for project teams to really streamline this approach so that when project teams are gathering all that information and finding EPDs and things like that, it's a little more streamlined and less time consuming. So we're really excited about these updates and future updates to come on that. So I will say those kind of new additions will be relevant to both options 1 and 2 paths 1 and 2 within option 2. Um, and then the option 1 whole building LCA has not changed. This will look the same as you see currently on the credit library. And for those familiar with the Echo schema, you'll notice this is an exact replica for the categories that we have, all the way down to the biogenic accounting, as well as the impact areas. So not a lot has changed there. Then again, nothing has changed for tracking construction emissions from construction activities. And so you'll see this looks very similar for contractors to report and subcontractors to report as well. I do want to highlight we do have the optional piece of option 3, which is the material transport carbon emissions. So if project teams are looking to, um, you know, add even more exciting steps to their carbon accounting, it's a great way to move forward. And then I just want to highlight that for construction emissions tracking, we've created this template tracking resource, which is optional. But if contractors would like to give their subcontractors a resource and kind of ease of tracking, this is a great resource. Additionally, we have just the summary tab, which all of the data will be fed into so project teams can get an understanding of how they're scoring within the rating system for the MR or the embodied carbon credits in MR. So that's a quick update to those things. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare. All right, and then with that, I'm going to hand it back to Wes to talk about a couple more MR credits.
Great. Yeah, so lots of enhancements there. And just as background, each of the credits in the rating system, a lot of the materials credits have calculators with them. So there's some important updates that we've made. We're always looking at ways to improve the calculators and work with providers such as Click and others to make sure that what outputs you get from like a whole building LCA software or an EPD-based software, those can be streamlined for documenting LEED credits. So that's something we can talk more about later, but exciting to see. I'm going to just cover a couple of more credits that touch on embodied carbon and LEED V5, and then we can get into some Q&A. So this one, credit 4, is called Building Product Selection and Procurement, BPSP, we call it. And again, this replaced the credit that used to be EPDs and sourcing of raw materials and material ingredients. So it's really a way to holistically look at products and materials across multi-attributes, and you see them on the bottom of the screen there: climate health, human health, ecosystem health, social health and equity, and a circular economy. I think we have a nice graphic on the next slide that shows it in colorful detail. But the idea here in V5 was we aligned the terminology with the Common Materials Framework from the AIA Materials Pledge, as well as Mindful Materials. And so we're trying to have the industry, much like what was mentioned with ECHO, we're trying to have the industry align where possible on terminology and reporting and such, so that if you're talking about embodied carbon or circularity or healthy materials, et cetera, air quotes, then there's a common definition of what those things mean. So whether you're working in LEED or other rating systems or whatnot, there is a common set of language and criteria. And so that's something we've leaned heavily into, and the BPSP product credit is specifically leaning into that. And there's a lot more on it. If you go to the next slide, there's there's the handy graphic that shows the credits that combined into one. And not to forget also that low emitting materials is now part of this credit. So we've also tried to combine attributes so that when you're specifying individual products, not so much on a whole building LCA or something, but if you're looking at your finishes and other materials, all the things that we care about environmental products should be able to be found in one place. And those are all the things you see on the screen here. And so the calculators are combined. You can document all this in one major calculator called the Building Product Selection and Procurement. And then, on the next one is what we've done is go ahead. I know it's a little grainy here. You can follow the QR code to look into details. But we outlined specifically product attributes that contribute to the credit. And essentially, this is a kind of a mini ranking system of product attributes. So EPDs, cradle-to-cradle products, recycled content, low-emitting materials. All these things are now quantified following those kind of multi-attribute criteria and scored in the rating system as such. And what's important here to know is that if you're looking for products and materials for LEED, this table of values here will show you which eco labels and standards are eligible for LEED, and then how much they're scored or weighted. I just wanted to highlight here that EPDs show up in this credit, so specific EPDs for finished materials or flooring or something like that. And there's different weightings. You can get a basic EPD for having a product specific. You get some awarding for that. But there's higher multipliers. There's higher awards for products that are optimized, that have reduced embodied carbon against themselves or when compared against an industry average EPD. And so there's still a strong preference and use of EPDs by themselves, especially for finished products in the rating system. And this is kind of the decoder for how those are scored in the rating system. So check that out. We also have on our website, usgbc.org, we've got education specifically on this in our education library. So lots more to check out there. And last but not least, material reuse. Lindsay mentioned it up top, but kind of starting at the bottom, but really the main emphasis on reducing embodied carbon is to lean into the reuse of buildings and materials. And in LEED version 5, we put this as a high priority for project teams, and it's worth up to 4 or 5 points, depending on the rating system, for doing materials reuse at scale. And so this is important because whether you're occupying an existing building and doing some renovations to keep it in use for longer, that's one thing, or you're going and finding materials offsite and incorporating them into the building as an offsite reuse, that is also rewarded heavily in LEED v5. And all of those strategies you do, you can also take credit for in things like whole building LCA. So if you've got elements of the building that are reused, left in place, or you procured some reuse materials from offsite, be sure and model those in the software and take advantage of those basically zero embodied carbon for the A phases, if you will, most of the A phases, for doing that work and getting those reused materials. So it's a huge contributor to earning those top tier points in embodied carbon. There's a few strategies in LEED that are kind of like multipliers. You do a great strategy and it affects and gives you lots of points in the rating system. Things like a green roof or procuring renewable energy. You'll get points for that, and it also helps with other places in the rating system. Like green roof helps you with rainwater reduction or capture reduction. It helps you with insulating the building, for example, as well as providing habitat and space. And things like renewables helps you with your energy code performance and your carbon assessment and your carbon credits, as well as things like the renewable energy credits. Just like that, buildings and material reuse, you can take credit for the fact that you're putting those into a building. You can also model them in embodied carbon and get savings there for reducing on the whole building LCA credits. And you can also take advantage of those under the product procurement as a sustainability attribute for products. So it's one of the secret sauces of LEED v5 is reuse. So please do that good work and take the credit for doing so throughout the rating system. All right, and just a few slides here to wrap up. We mentioned a couple times some ideas about a project priority library, and this is, again, new for LEED v5. LEED has always had sort of an innovation credit category, but it's been greatly expanded up to 10 points, and it allows project teams to take advantage for exemplary performance. Say you've knocked it out of the park and you've done a much greater job than even the top tier of a point threshold. There, you can get extra credit for that here. There's regional strategies, like maybe there's credits, like we have a whole suite of credits in Europe for um, the frameworks and levels and things like that in Europe. So you can take advantage of those in these project priority libraries as well. Or a project specific, maybe you're working on a school or a data center or something, and there's some specific things that we'd like to see those buildings do. They'll be shown in this library. And of course, innovations, things that go beyond the rating system, are eligible here. And the last but not least is pilot credits. So ideas that are concepts we're testing out, we want to get more projects doing. We want to see if there's suitability for greater adoption in the rating system, but maybe they're not quite ready for prime time yet. Those are what we consider pilot credits. And the middle there, the materials and resources credits, a lot of those are pilot credits that we have introduced already into the rating system. There's the 181 credit, which is multi-attribute structure, enclosure, hardscape, and other. So that's applying those same multi-attribute frameworks to all building materials besides finishes. So if you're sourcing your concrete, does your concrete also have a material ingredient disclosure? Or is it circular? Have you documented the recycled content of that? If you're doing steel, is it produced in a factory that's decarbonizing their steel manufacturing or whatnot? Then there's a credit 182, which looks at innovative low embodied carbon concrete. We're trying to incentivize the next generation solutions that are happening. Design for circularity looks at the project early about how can you design for the building to be reused in the future. And there's a new pilot credit on multi-attribute MEP products. So getting EPDs and additional documentation around MEP products so we can fill in some of those data gaps. We also are working on pilot credits for innovative low embodied carbon steel, and we just released one on tribally sourced wood, as Lindsay mentioned earlier. So that's for finding wood that's sourced from North American tribes that have been stewards for the land for a long time. So taking credit for procurement of those wood sources. So lots of good things happening in this library. We're super excited about it. So check that out and keep monitoring as we release things every 6 months or so. Reference guides. So we're going to get into Q&A. There's some great questions coming in already, but a lot of the things will be answered through reference guides. We've spent quite a lot of time developing additional requirements, like explaining the thinking behind the credits, or explaining the documentation requirements, going into the reference standards and pulling out specific parts that are important, and the section called further explanation. So this is a guide that is part of your membership to USGBC, or you can have a membership or purchase the reference guides themselves, but it is something that will help project teams seeking LEED v5 compliance and documentation. A lot of the questions that you may have will be answered in those reference guides. We encourage you to check those out and really use them as a resource on your LEED journey. And the other thing is, a lot of what you see, there's the rating system itself is available online in the credit library on the left there. And when you go into the credit library, there's a section on there that says guidance or a guide, and you push that button and it goes right to the reference guide. So if you've got the subscription to that reference guide, you can have it all in one handy place in the online credit library. And the good thing about that, as opposed to like a PDF, is it's updated whenever the reference guide or the credits get updated, or addenda and things like that. It's all in real time updated in the online credit library. So those are, again, key resources when you're working on a LEED project. And then Lindsay, you mentioned a little bit about ECHO, but maybe want to share just a little bit on what's happening with our partners there.
Yes, so the ECHO project, as folks might know, is the embodied carbon harmonization and optimization project. And so USGBC, along with many others, has been a convener um, and one of the participating orgs. And so we are all collectively working on now baseline guidance for whole project LCA. And this will be something we hope to release very soon. And this is something we'll kind of touch on relative to baselines, but this has been a really big question that the group has tried to tackle, understanding the kind of range of baselines that are appropriate and what makes sense. So expanded guidance will be coming soon out of that group. And just a reminder that we have Green Build coming up in October. So really hope to see you all there. You can scan that QR code to go right to the information for Green Build, but it's going to be a really fabulous event. The Materials Summit, I will say, it has a lot of exciting content that will be coming up. So looking forward to seeing you all there. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll get into some Q&A.
Yeah, there's some great questions coming in, and I don't think we'll have a chance to answer all of them, but let's hit on a couple of ones that we hear often and see in the chat here. Um, how do you define a baseline? What's reasonable? What data quality is preferred versus required, et cetera? Are there any guidelines we can share?
Yeah, so I can take this one. Um, we do have a lot of content in the LEED v5 reference guide that we had a QR code to, where we give kind of guidelines and guardrails for creating a baseline for whole building LCA. Really kind of highlighting regional appropriateness, functional equivalence, in addition to data hierarchy. So um, creating a baseline that's representative of your regional materials and assemblies is really key. I will note that this is not a drastic departure from our guidance that has been published in V4 or V4.1, but we are really looking forward to collaborating on that ECHO guidance to be published hopefully later this year. So keep an eye out for that. Um, Alrighty, should we move to the next question?
Sure. Let's see. Are there good resources on helping create comparable baselines and proposed on whole building LCA? I think you touched on this a little bit with the ECHO guidance. So that is something we are, again, in the reference guide, we've got some content there, but ECHO is looking at adding to it. And one of the questions we often get on that is like, what software is approved for LEED v5 and in whole building LCA? And I would say that we don't approve software per se, and we more specify the requirements that any software tool must follow and able to be eligible for the rating system, including how to develop the ISO standards that are appropriate for the data underlying it, and also the comparability assessments. Like if you're in a certain region, is the average data or the above average, things like that, isn't it reasonable for that project? So those are all things we're working to provide guidance on, but also there's some information in the reference guide. Anything you'd add to that, Lindsay?
No, I think that sums it up. I think
Okay.
that's a good. So one question we have is, what happens when there's a data gap? How do I show reductions? And so with this, I will say just a reminder that if there's no data available, you are not going to be documenting a reduction. Um, the way that you'll show reductions is from CLF baselines or for EPD analysis from something like a CLF baseline with a product specific EPD. So if you are seeing those gaps, you are likely not going to be able to document a reduction. And if there's nothing available, you would get what's closest, most regionally appropriate. Maybe it's CLF material baselines, maybe it's an industry-wide EPD, something like that. So ultimately, that's when you have a data gap, likely not going to be able to show a reduction for it.
Yeah. And I saw this one come in, someone asking, how do we document a buy clean policy? So like where I live, I'm in California, and we have a buy clean policy for construction materials in the state, certain project types. And that was if you go back to the slides with Lindsay, not the, check out reduce embodied carbon credit option 2, is it option 2, path 2, which is the product specific pathway for EPDs. And the idea is there you're comparing against a benchmark and showing that you've met at least industry average for that material category. And that's meant to align with Buy Clean. So if you're doing Buy Clean policies, whether it's California or Oregon or wherever else it might be, there's lots of these policies popping up. We're trying to track those and monitor them so they can be compatible with those credits and LEED. Because we'd like to reward the good things that are happening on embodied carbon, especially at the policy level, and make those streamlined in the rating system. So good question there. Lindsay, I see one on what about Europe? If a project team's using levels, or what about whole life carbon like RICS? That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good one. So, ultimately, for a project in Europe, if you want to use levels, you can. We have European EU taxonomy. And so that kind of lays out the differentiation between what you'll see in kind of V5 requirements to EU taxonomy with levels. So check that out on the V5 website. Whole life carbon. Since it is a newer topic with not as much, a little more nebulous guidance at this point, it's not in the formal rating system. I will say, though, that the aspects of it branch into many pieces of the credit. We have a super light version of whole life carbon starting to happen in the IP carbon assessment, in which, um, cross credit category information starts to come together to inform project teams. Um, we are, have a pilot credit in process that speaks to some of this, but the rating system is always evolving, and it might be something that is tackled in V6, depending on where the market goes. As we see, those best practices are always kind of shifting over time.
Excellent. And maybe the last one before we run out of time here is, what do I do if there's no data for products or buildings in my region? I think that's like a whole building LCA question. And we've seen this quite a bit too, where maybe there's a project that you can find some industry average data, but not a lot of EPDs, or maybe there aren't as many software tools or whatnot. I'll let our friends at OneClick talk about how to do it in their software, but we do have, I mean, that's kind of why I would say, maybe you can answer this too, Lindsay, is partly why we've embedded those CLF baselines into the credit calculator and the prerequisite calculator, is so that if you perhaps don't have more regional contextual data, you can at least satisfy the prerequisite using CLF to show that it's really about, like you were saying, carbon literacy. Let's
Mhm.
understand the major impacts for embodied carbon on your project. Is it your concrete or your steel or whatnot? Like, understand those and start to address them and find solutions. And if there isn't more specific data in your region, then that's a place to look for improvements, or maybe talk to experts, manufacturers, trade groups, to try to build that database of materials or the data knowledge so that there can start to be optimizations. But typically there are projects in all regions, there's products that meet kind of, whether it's low embodied concrete, or steel or something like that. There are manufacturing that's happening. It's just trying to get that information from your manufacturers and groups. Anything you'd add to that, Lindsay?
No, I think that sums it up well.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we'll
Awesome.
kick it
Well,
back. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say thank you guys both so much. This is super informative, and like you said, a lot of great questions, and uh, I'm sure more will keep coming in. But thank you guys so much for your time. Now, I am going to hand it over to Emma Donnelly, who is with One Click LCA. She's going to talk a little bit more about our solutions that can help you meet these new LEED V5 requirements. But Wes, Lindsay, thank you guys so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank
Our
you.
pleasure.
Okay, so that was great. Thank you so much to Wes and Lindsay for coming on and sharing about the V5. And now, as you can see, Emma has joined the stage. She's going to be talking a little bit more about One Click LCA solutions. Before we get started, just wanted to survey the audience and see who in the audience would like to learn more about Click LCA's LEED V5 tool. You can click yes on the poll that is appearing on your screen right now. And if you do click yes, someone will reach out to you. We'll schedule a free custom consultation for you and your company, and you can see how our LEED V5 tool can help you. And if you're not ready to learn about the LeadB5 tool, you can just say not right now, and that will be fine. Now, before I hand it over to Emma, like I said, we have a dedicated LeadV5 tool, but she's actually going to talk about a different one of our tools today that is going to be a complement to the LeadV5 tool and will help you in your LEED compliance. So Emma, I will hand it over to you, and I'll actually stop sharing and let you share your screen.
Sounds good. Thank you, Aileen. Okay, and thank you to Wes and Lindsay for that excellent overview of what's changing in LEED V5 and more importantly, why those changes matter. One theme that really stood out to me throughout today's discussion is that LEED V5 is moving beyond simply collecting documentation and towards demonstrating measurable environmental performance. We've heard about the new embodied carbon prerequisite, the reduced embodied carbon credit, the increased emphasis on decarbonization, and the introduction of mandatory embodied carbon reductions for projects using platinum certification. The opportunity is significant, but naturally it raises an important question. How do project teams actually put all of this into practice? And that's where software platforms like Click LCA can help. As Wes mentioned, USGBC works closely with software providers, including Click LCA, to ensure project teams can efficiently document and demonstrate compliance with LEED requirements. Our goal is to help simplify what can otherwise become a very complex process. Whether you're pursuing option 1 through whole building lifecycle assessment, option 2 through EPD analysis, documenting reused materials, leveraging CLF baselines, or preparing LEED-ready reporting outputs, Click LCA provides workflows designed specifically to support those activities. And as Aileen mentioned, today, rather than focusing on the whole building LCA side of the platform, I'd like to spend a few minutes on a complementary tool within the Click LCA ecosystem called Materials Compass. So you can see it here on the screen. Now, Aileen did go through a little bit about how Click LCA supports whole building lifecycle assessment and embodied carbon modeling. So I'm going to focus on Materials Compass and how it helps you directly select materials and embodied carbon reduction strategies for your projects. Because one of the challenges that surfaced repeatedly throughout today's discussion was this. Once you've identified embodied carbon as a priority, how do you actually find, evaluate, and compare products that can help reduce it? And that's exactly what Materials Compass was designed to do. As Lindsay discussed during the webinar, option 2 of the reduced embodied carbon credit allows teams to earn points by demonstrating reductions through environmental product declarations, or EPDs. In many cases, project teams already know which material categories are driving carbon impacts. The challenge then becomes identifying which products within these categories perform best. For example, which insulation product has the lowest embodied carbon? Which products perform better than the industry average? Which manufacturers have optimized EPDs that may help support credit achievement? And finally, how do you compare multiple products without manually collecting and analyzing dozens of EPD documents? These are exactly the types of questions Materials Compass helps answer. Now, let me show you what it looks like. So, on your screen, you'll see this is kind of the landing page for when you log into Materials Compass. Materials Compass provides access to one of the world's largest databases of verified environmental product data, with more than 400,000 EPDs currently available. And this number is growing every day as our team continues to add new environmental product data from manufacturers around the world. Users can search products by manufacturer, product category, material type, geography, certification attributes, and environmental performance characteristics. This becomes particularly valuable because one of the challenges discussed during today's webinar was data availability. Whether you're working in North America or internationally, having access to a broad and continually expanding library of verified environmental data can significantly reduce the effort required to identify suitable products. Let's start with a simple example. Imagine we're evaluating insulation products for a project pursuing LEED version 5 embodied carbon reductions. Within Materials Compass, I can search the insulation category and immediately access products with verified EPD data. Rather than spending hours sourcing EPD PDFs from multiple manufacturers' websites, the information is all here, centralized, searchable, and consistently organized. I can review the product information, environmental performance data, EPD validity periods, manufacturer details, and key impact indicators such as global warming potential. This helps project teams quickly understand not only whether a product has an EPD, but how it actually performs. And under LEED v5, that distinction is increasingly important. The objective is no longer simply just collecting EPDs. The objective is now using EPD data to better support decisions earlier on in the design process. Now, one of the most powerful features within the Materials Compass is the ability to compare up to 5 EPDs side by side. Here, I'm sharing an example where we've taken 3 of the insulation products from the previous search, and we're comparing them side by side. So we're looking at 2 conventional insulation products alongside a cool new product, hemp fiber-based insulation product. So we're looking at the environmental performance information presented in a consistent format across all 3 products. Instead of manually building spreadsheets and trying to normalize information from different EPDs, Materials Compass allows you to quickly compare global warming potential values and other environmental indicators. This makes it much easier to evaluate whether innovative products, such as hemp fiber insulation, may offer embodied carbon advantages compared to more traditional alternatives. And this is where I think LEED v5 becomes really exciting. For the first time, projects are being rewarded for not simply just finding EPDs, but using EPD data to make better material decisions. For a project team pursuing option 2, this can also help identify products that outperform industry averages and support embodied carbon reduction strategies. For manufacturers, it provides visibility to how their products compare within the market and where opportunities may exist for further optimization. For sustainability consultants and design teams, it creates a much more efficient workflow for evaluating alternatives during specification and procurement. I think it's also important to recognize how Materials Compass complements whole building lifecycle assessment. Earlier, Lindsay highlighted that option 1 offers the greatest point opportunity, but can also be the most comprehensive pathway. A whole building LCA can help identify the project's largest embodied carbon hotspots. Materials Compass can then help teams investigate lower carbon alternatives within those hotspot categories. In other words, the tools work together. The LCA helps identify where reductions are available. Materials Compass helps teams evaluate which products may help achieve those reductions. And perhaps most importantly, these aren't separate workflows. Once you've identified preferred products within the Materials Compass, those selected EPDs can be pulled directly into your Click LCA project. This allows teams to move seamlessly from product research and EPD comparison into whole building modeling without duplicating work. It's a connected workflow that helps bridge the gap between product selection and project-level embodied carbon analysis, making it easier to evaluate design decisions and support LEED v5 documentation requirements. As LEED v5 continues to accelerate the industry's focus on embodied carbon, access to reliable and transparent product data will become increasingly important. Whether you're pursuing option 1 through whole building LCA, option 2 through EPD analysis, combining multiple pathways, evaluating reused materials, or simply looking to make more informed specification decisions, Click LCA provides the tools that help simplify the process and align project workflows with LEED requirements. Hopefully, today's demonstration showed how Materials Compass can help teams move beyond simply collecting EPDs and begin using environmental data to make more informed decisions throughout design and procurement. Thanks for joining us today. And with that, I'll hand it back to Eileen to wrap things up and answer any remaining questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you for sharing about Materials Compass. A lot of great uses for that tool, and really excited to see. I'm going to share my screen. Really excited to see the different ways that we can support LEED v5 compliance. So, real quick, once again, before we let you all go, I know we asked a little bit earlier if you wanted to know more about the LEED V5 tool specifically, but now that you've seen a demonstration of the materials compass and you've learned how that can also support your LEED compliance, we'd love to see if you want to book a demo to talk about materials compass. So again, there's going to be a pop-up on your screen, and if you would like to book a demo, please click yes. If seeing materials compass maybe change your mind a little bit, then go ahead and click yes. And of course, if you are not ready to book a custom consultation, you can always click not now. You can learn more at oneclicklca.com. And I also wanted to invite everybody to our live product release that is happening tomorrow. You can register via the QR code that you see on your screen now. And if you are not able to attend live, if it doesn't work for your time zone, I know that we are broadcasting to a lot of time zones right now, you can still register and you'll get the recording sent to your email. So please do register and you'll learn even more about the new offerings that One Click LCA has. And so once again, I want to thank Wes and Lindsay for coming on and sharing their expertise about LEED V5. Thank you, Emma, for sharing the One Click LCA solutions. And thank you to our entire audience. Thank you guys for coming as always, and we will see you on the next webinar. Bye.